Right. So in other cases, I usually start with a bad joke or a lame pun. But after that Mahendra Singh Dhoni and GOD reference, I don't think that would hold fast in this code. So I'd rather just start with simple hello. Right. At least someone has said hello. I was expecting someone to start with Adele's It's Me. But since we did not go there, hello world does just fine. But can we have a little bit more of enthusiasm? Hello. Hello. Right. Thank you. So I am here to bore you for the next hour and a half, if I can continue, because before coming here, I haven't slept in 30 hours. I was at a hackathon trying to design something that would rival Neotech Hub. And I'm very blatant in saying that I have been generous in design things from the center. So, hello again, I'm Shuvam Manna. I'm a computer science undergrad at Heritage Institute of Technology. I've been working with dialog flow and conversation-based interfaces for the last couple of years. And how many of you were there in the DSC organized IO extended? Great. So for you, it will probably be a repetition of what you have already heard. There will be new contents, there will be new things to explore, but you might just sit back and relax. For the first thing, those of you who are already have opened your laptops and ready to take notes, for the first half, close it all now. For the first half, you don't need a laptop. Just close it. So this is a brief introduction of mine. This is the weirdest picture I could find of me because I'm not related to giving decent pictures of my face because I don't really look at this guy. So these are my social media handles and media, like the things where you can go and reach out to me. The first is my mail ID. The second is my Instagram ID. Please follow me there. I'm a great photographer. Just kidding. The third is me on Twitter. So you can anytime you want any help, anytime you want any advice, or you just want to chat up with and hear some lame jokes and bad puns, you can always bring up. So next thing we'll start with is building conversations. Now, why do we go into building conversations? This agenda today is about actions on Google, right? How many of you have used the Google system? Show of hands. How many of you have used Siri? Show of hands. Now, how many of you have used Siri before using the Google Assistant? Last question of the day. How many of you have used Google Assistant before it was opened up to developers? Like, who are the earliest users of Google Assistant when it was just available on stock Android ROMs? Right. So, why are we talking about actions on Google in the very first place? How many of you are app developers? Right. So, whenever you're building an app, besides the backend services and all the other things you try to integrate into that service, what is the basic thing you need to make sure that a user actually goes out and uses your app? What is the first thing you need? A UI. Anything else? Sorry? Data. Anything else? Like what in the first place would draw a user to actually use your app? So suppose you build something like a social network like Facebook. Why would people jump ship from Facebook and join your platform? What do you need? Fast and reliable service, right? Interactivity. So can I club them all together and say that in the very first place to draw in users for your service, you need what we might call an intuitive AI, intuitive UI. Now, what do we mean by the word intuitive? Anyone? Just what do you mean? Like whenever I said intuitive UI, a lot of you nodded your heads. Like, what do we really mean by it?
You know what the next step is.
You know what the next step is. And
it should be creative and it should be good and
no, best seconds. I'm not so partial very
it should look good to the user. Whenever the user will turn on the app first time, it should look like, yeah, this is something I can explore. So the app should be designed so nicely that people can get into it.
Intuitive UI. So can I just club all of it together and say simply that intuitive UI might be something which has a very low learning curve. Like you don't need to go through a lot of manuals, you don't need to go through a lot of guidance to understand what you need to do next. Right? So if that is the case, whenever you're building an UI, understand that At some point or the other, the user should figure out that you have to click a certain button, you have to hit a certain hamburger menu in order to open something, right? Suppose it's a Facebook app and they're looking for a logout option. It's not in the front view. You have to hit the hamburger menu on the right, you have to scroll all the way down, then you can hit logout. And this was a reason I forgot to log out many a times when I used to use Facebook on my mother's phone like 4 or 5 years back, and she used to scroll down my newsfeed. You know what happens when your mom checks your accounts. So that is a very problematic, because at some level or the other, you need to have some sort of a learning curve to make sure that the user understands whatever you need to use of them, right? Sir just now told you about a system which modifies itself according to the user, right? An education platform that modifies itself how the user behaves. So what if you had an UI that modifies itself to what the user thinks you should do next? Right? How many of you have seen Iron Man and wanted to build the next Jarvis? Should I assume the rest of you have not seen Iron Man? Or do you not find Jarvis cool? Or do you not like the voice of Paul Bettany? So anyway, so the very first reason why we're talking about building a conversation is nothing can be more intuitive than interacting with someone or something using just your voice. You tell Google, tell you the weather. Whereas if it had been an app, you have to go to the menu, you have to open up the app drawer, then you have to search for the weather app, then you click on it, then the weather flashes in front of you. Now you just long press the home button, the assistant comes up, hey Google, tell me the weather. Plain and simple. Job done. Right? So nothing can be more intuitive than building a voice-based interface. And when we're talking about a voice-based interface, even before Google Assistant came and became a mainstream voice assistant for others, we had Siri. But what was the limitation with Siri? Siri was more functional than personal. You could not really personalize Siri before the iOS 12 update where you can build your own shortcuts. You had to rely on what Apple had already baked in. One Google Assistant, as soon as the SDK was released, you were free to customize it in your own free way. And if you're not in development, if you don't want to customize your own and build your own actions, and you don't want to build your own custom commands, Google had the matter somewhat sorted for you. That you need these basic commands that are baked in, you do it. If Google does not recognize it as a system command, it just shows you a search result. Right? Then we came to know about the messenger chatbots. A quick trivia question. Can anyone tell me when were the messenger chatbot, the first messenger APK 1.1 was released? Messenger API 1.1 was released. Anyone? Random guess. In which year did messenger chatbots really become popular? 8, that's too early. 16. 16 was when version 2 was released. 15 was when version 1 was released. So right. So you got nearly correct. So before messenger bots were released, Facebook had under them a project called M. How many of you used Google Allo? Right. So Allo had a feature that in a conversation, whenever you wanted to search for something, you would add Google and the assistant got invoked right in the conversation. M was a personal digital assistant by Facebook that was intended to do the same thing. What its USP was, what Facebook wanted its USP to be, was that they wanted it to be not just powered by AI, they wanted it to be controlled by humans as well. Right. So they wanted it to be an AI plus human partnership that delivered content through M. Due to a limited usage, because Facebook did not really have the manpower to put forward that human AI interaction to a whole market, M was abandoned. But from M sprang the messenger chatbots platform. How many of you have heard of Eliza? Eliza was the first of its kind chatbot written by John Weizenbaum with MIT Labs in 1985. It was a simple rule-based chatbot which just had hard-coded queries and answers to it. It had the simplest NLP of all times. It just detected words, and if you had certain words, it returned you a certain word. But the way Eliza was designed was that if it does not recognize certain context, it threw the question back at you. So that at some level, you have to clarify the question again. And in that process, it hoped to get another parameter which matched this database. So this was a pivotal sort of area was using Eliza. The Messenger Platform 1.1 was released with the very first NLPs of ELIZA. Since then, ML has improved in leaps and bounds, but that was the very first step. How many of you have heard of OpenAI? I'm asking a lot of questions. But this is not a test, so you can OpenAI. Okay, OpenAI. Tell us what you know about it.
OpenAI is a platform where you can develop certain things like using artificial intelligence, and OpenAI is made by Elon Musk, I guess.
And what does OpenAI actually do?
I don't know the exact.
Anyone knows what OpenAI can actually do? Just take a look at the name itself and guess from it. But you get this anyway for getting it correct. Are you not doing those? A huge round of applause for me. So OpenAI basically what Elon Musk did was he wanted to spread AI. Why? Because Elon Musk is always afraid of it. So he wanted to make sure everyone knew about AI so that everyone could contribute to stop AI when it threatened to overthrow the humans. Right? So OpenAI open sourced the code, and somehow an OpenAI developer created a bot that beat the Dota 2 world champions. I'm sure you would have come across this piece of news at least. So that is where we are going with bots at this level, right? So when bots are taking over, it's imperative that we somehow find a way to interact with bots at some level and go ahead from mainstream apps and build something which we can interact with our bots, right? When the first when the first Google Assistant was released, the major beef of every developer and every user in the community was A, it was not customizable. B, it was available only for pixels. 3, it had limited functionality. It was just a glorified Google now. 3 months later, Google released the SDK. And since then, it has seen a flood of new actions. Anyone who can tell me what actions on Google actually are gets a goodie. Anyone? What exactly are actions on Google?
You can ask the things.
No, sure, go ahead. Yes, sure.
Actions on Google is like you can in Google use action. Right? It is not like common order. So it calls action on Google means you can add a new action.
So if I have to draw a relation with the mainstream platforms, can I call actions as the apps for the Google Assistant platform? Right? So actions are basically apps for the Google Assistant platforms. Look at this. So I won't bore you with Messenger and bot trivia anymore. But let us get into the crux of what we want to talk about. Why do we need to build a conversation? Because see, when chatbots were released, there were two kinds of chatbots. One, rule-based. The second, AI-based. Recently, I don't know if you've come across a news or not, I came across in a TechCrunch article that recently a non-AI chatbot called Landbot probably landed a 2.2 million Series A. What Landbot does is, it helps you create a rule-based chatbot wherein you don't input anything, you don't have to write any code, you don't have to write any inputs even to the bot. You just build a bot for your website and then it guides the user through its own specialized rule-based chatbot, right? It doesn't use any AI. It's a bunch of simple if-else commands. How many of you have heard of if-else commands? That's an encouragement. So, rule-based chatbots are not really a very difficult thing to implement because rule-based chatbots, you essentially provide them with buttons as responses which they click on, and then you implement a simple rule-based, like if he presses this button, do that, if he presses that button, do that. So rule-based chatbots are not really that difficult to make. You can make one, you can go to platforms like Chatfuel and ManyChat, you can build one of your own in maybe a minute or two. But what we need to look at and what we need to build conversations for are the AI-based chatbots. Now, what do AI-based chatbots do? They interact with the user. They mold their questions and responses according to what the user is saying. Yes? They learn continuously. And as a result, they evolve continuously. The same thing which INB does to their platform. So when you're building something that develops itself consistently and develops itself continuously through interactions, how will you make sure? Like whenever you're building an app, you can make sure that you have a very good UI, a very good robust backend, you have a very good interface, you have very good marketing people, and people come and use your app. Whenever you're using a bot, whenever you're using conversation as your main driver, what do you need to make sure that those things happen? The answer is in the slide, so you don't get a brownie point. Anyone can answer 10 questions.
People should not understand that it's a bot.
People should not understand there's a bot behind it. Who developed a test to make sure? You guys have heard about Turing test, right? You guys have done it. Like how have you guys done a Turing test? Anyone? How have you seen the Turing test in action? Anyone? It's simple. Capture. Yeah. Yeah. So, have you guys ever done those things? Prove you're not a bot by clicking on all the signs which do not have a street symbol, which do not have a road. Earlier, it used to be just a bunch of numbers and alphabets on a squiggly background, just to make sure that someone cannot read it and only a human can read it. CAPTCHA stands for Completely Automated Public Turing Test to tell computers and humans apart. So whenever you're building an AI-based chatbot, you need to make sure that your chatbot is actually interactive and fun. It need not always be short and sweet. Because suppose when someone opens the Google Assistant and tells them, I love you, and Google Assistant says, I love you too, that's no fun. That's something you can expect that's something very rule-based, right? The developers of Google Assistant can simply think that, okay, someone is so lonely, they will invoke the assistant and say, I love you, and I can say, I love you in return. So what your bots need to have is a very first place. It's a persona, a personality of their bot. In such a way that whenever they engage with any user, they can keep the user hooked with their own capability to impress them. What is a persona? The aspect of someone's character as perceived by others, the role or character adopted by an author or an actor. Anyone wants to explain what these means? Anyone? Suppose you are building a bot, suppose you're building a business entirely out of your bot, you have no app, you have no website. How would you try to hook the user in? Any pointers? Anyone? Right. So we can customize and personalize them per se. What else? What more can we do? What more? What more can we do to make sure the user keeps coming back to our action? Ask the user more questions, more interaction with the user. What else?
Know about the user. Have some knowledge about that user.
Right. So if we know what we can personalize itself according to the user. That's what Sir also said in the beginning, right? Anything else? Anything other thing you need to know? So it needs to make sure that all the multiple constraints are made on test cases are passed. Right. All the use cases. Is there anyone who's not understanding this thing? You can raise your hand. I will break it down into simple steps for you. Right. Which part? This part. Okay, fine. I don't know what this part is, so I'll just go through the entire thing over again. So when you're interacting with a bot, you need to make sure that people and users come back to your platform. You need to make sure the bot is interactive. Suppose you're making friend with another person. What do you look for? Like tastes, similar interests, and someone will interact with you, right? You don't want a friend who will just hear everything and keep playing Candy Crush on his phone. That's not how you make friends. At least not everyone. Some of you make friends to play PUBG, but how many of you play PUBG? Rohit, I know about you. So the thing is, you need to make sure that your app or your bot or your whatever is personalized to every user, and that it interacts with every user in such a way that it keeps them engaged and coming back. So when a user goes to your action and says, "I love you," bot XYZ, it needs a reply that wants the user to come back and say it all over again. Right? You need to develop a separate, complete personality for your bot. You need to develop something which will make the author or the user feel that they're not talking with a robot with some rule-based responses, but someone who can actually come up with responses of this way. Essentially, you have to replicate, and your goal should be create something similar to Google Duplex. Anyone who knows what Duplex is? Rajat, please explain what Duplex is. Then.
I can't explain the whole thing, but yeah, Duplex would let you make calls through background. Like your assistant will call and book an appointment for you in the salon or something. Any appointment in the spa or in the salon. So it will do a background call for you. You don't need to go and actually explain to a person that I want to book an appointment for my haircut. Right? So the whole thing, it happens in the background, does it in the. So yeah, that is what the whole project Duplex is all about. But getting into the nitty-gritty of it, I'm not the guy who can explain it.
I will just let you have here, those who have not heard the Google I extended this year, I will just let you have a small demo of what the concept is.
60% of small businesses don't have an online booking system set up. We think AI can help with this problem. So let's go back to this example. Let's say you want to ask Google to make you a haircut appointment on Tuesday between 10 and noon.
Listen carefully.
So what you're going to hear is the Google Assistant actually calling a real salon to schedule the appointment for you. Let's listen.
How can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me one second. Sure, what time are you looking for, Will? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like, what service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now? Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's your first name? The first name is Lisa? Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks, great. Have a great day, guys.
Which part do you think made it believable that it's not a robot call? Now, everyone is like, okay, a robot does. There's another demo where he calls up a restaurant and he actually says and there's a pregnant pause in the middle which actually makes you believe it's a human being. No, there's a lot of outcry over this that whether it's ethical or not to not let someone know that they're actually interacting with a bot and not a human being. But this is as far as we can stretch our goals to be. This is how far we can make sure that people understand that bots can raise to this level where people cannot differentiate between a human and a bot. Right? And that is why they need a bot. Yes?
So there can be a situation where two bots can be interacting with each other, right? The restaurant can also make a bot from their side, and so that can be a huge problem, right? The bots will be like chatting to each other, and like the people. So what will the people do then? Like, don't get into those things. Try to understand. Don't get into ethical stuff.
The people will do the haircut. Right? The bots will be making appointments.
Don't get into ethical stuff, guys. Stay there.
So it's essentially if someone is like, I don't want to make a call myself, I'm too afraid to hit the call button, Google still does it for me. That's the basic crux of it. Now there are a lot of ethical ups and downs to it. Now there are reasons that while rolling out the Google Assistant, Google Duplex, Google is actually considering that before anyone calls up, it will actually be saying, hello, it's Google Assistant calling in behalf of this. But that defeats the very purpose, right? We are not here to talk about how ethical or unethical it is. We are here to understand what a bot can do in the first place and how you can design a bot and make sure the user keeps coming back to you. Now, everyone is a persona, right? It is what differentiates us from all of us. Homer has a persona, Sully has a persona, right? How many of you have used the Domino's and the Pizza Hut bot? This is an example I keep coming back to, right? So I forgot which is which, but one of these pizza bots is a rule-based chatbot, which just gives you an information on which pizza is available, who can deliver it, and knows the delivery time required, right? The other bot, I forgot it was Domino's, it's probably Domino's, who actually strike up a conversation with the user. Who actually strikes a conversation and suppose someone orders a large pepperoni and they suggest, would you like to have something else with it? They strike up a conversation so that it does not seem that it's a bot interacting with you. Because in the very first days of Facebook, it was a person who should reply to messages to a page, right? So when you're building a persona, you need to make sure that whenever you take that human element away, you have some way to retain that human element as well. That is why we need to create personalities for bots in their own rights. That is the very reason why we need to make sure that every bot has a personality of its own that keeps drawing the user back in, and the user does not really realize, okay, it's a robot I'm talking to, it's a stupid piece of metal who cannot do anything other than answer my queries. Now, why do we need a persona at all for a voice assistant? Clifford Nance and Scott Bravey, in their paper of theirs, said that whenever people hear any voice, they automatically and unconsciously, within the first few seconds, assign a personality to it. Now, suppose you're hearing the voice of an unknown person over a phone or somewhere. What are the very first things you judge? Or what are the very first things you know? What are the very first points of information that reveal itself to you when you talk with someone? Anyone? I'm crowdsourcing data now. Gender and age. Anything else? From where they are coming. Suppose someone calls you up and says, "Hey, tu kidhar hai?" And someone calls up and says, "Ha, tu kidhar hai?" What else can you deduce from these two different tones? Or you can deduce that Tanmay Bhatt is calling through one phone and your friend is calling through the other. So, essentially, we can derive a lot of points of information just by listening to a person's voice, right? And when you assume certain things about a person, you feel really bad when you see me, that person, and you see your expectations are full. It's disappointing, right? And if you're a business house who is using chatbots to drive his own business, someone who actually sees that it's a bot and their expectations are not being met, they won't come back and use that service. Because why will anyone use a service when they're disappointed with the service in the very first place? Be it for trivial reasons. Because when one person follows suit and does not use a device and does not use certain service and tells the world that this is a trivial reason why I did not, that creates the fundamental problem. When Facebook was first created, he said that we don't crash ever. Why? Because when MySpace crashes, when Friendster crashes, one user leaves, all their friends follow. So you need to make sure that you need to retain the maximum number of users possible. Which is why we pay so much attention to user retention. Getting users on a platform is not that difficult. You have a great marketing team, a great PR team. You tell your friends to do it for you and to get a lot of users in the very first place. But after the initial traction, you need to actually make sure that the product is actually good enough to retain those users on your platform. So that is why we need to create certain things. And the very first thing is a personality. Because unless you have a personality assigned to your bot or personality assigned to the action of the voice, you cannot really design a conversation of how it's going to be. Right? You cannot have an assistant delivering one response in a Tanmay Bhatt tone and next in a Vishwa Kalyan Rath tone. This is not comic stance, this is a service. Right? Whenever you're using a voice, these are the primary points which you can get to know: age, gender, education, from the way they're speaking, the tone, from the intonations, from the way they pronounce their phrases, register how they have been grown up, in which situation they live in, and to some extent when you hear the accent, you get to know about the locale, the places they live in. So when you hear a certain accent, you can tell he's a British guy. When you hear a certain accent, you can tell he's not very fluent in English and maybe he's from backward state. So these are the very few things you get to know.
What if it's a prank?
Right?
What if it's a prank?
We are not here to discuss ethical and ethical issues.
So, but then you said that if you can just go back to the last slide.
Yeah.
So you saying that in the voice there's education and register. I didn't really get the register part, but education part is what then?
If a real person calls you up, you can fake every single one of these. Right? A real person can fake every single one of these.
Yeah.
So we are not really talking about whether a person can call up and tell you it's a prank or not. I can, if Google Duplex is available, I can always say, hey Google, do a prank call on my friend Raja. So that is totally possible. We are not here to discuss what the technology can do. We are telling you how to make sure that it won't affect your users and it won't affect your service from a technology and a backend perspective. See, when you have a service, how you use it is up to you. When you know how to do a nuclear fusion, it's up to you. You can build a fusion reactor to power cities or to drop a bomb. Right? So after you have technology, it's always up to the human brain and ethics of what they'll do and what they won't do. It's not in our hands. So let's not go into that touchy topic. Now, why did I tell you to close your laptops and all your guys in the very first place? Whenever you're building a conversation or whenever you're building something like a personality, you don't really code a personality out explicitly somewhere. You don't say that a person needs to be angry, a person needs to be macho, a person needs to give expletives as explanation marks and stuff like that. You don't really hard code personality in that way. So what you need to do is, whenever you build an app action or an action on Google, you brainstorm a list of adjectives. You brainstorm a list of adjectives which will define your bot, right? Then what you do, you research a few different characters who embody the very same adjectives. You try to find out different bots, different services, different human beings, even cartoon characters who embody the very adjectives you seek to portray through your bot, through your action. That is the very reason why Google Assistant SDK now offers 6 or 7 different voices, right? To make sure that you can make your service distinct from all others. And while there are only 6 or 7 different voices, you can always program your bot to feel different in the way they interact with the user, right? You can program responses in Tanmay Bhatt mode for one service. You can portray responses in Vishwa Kalyan Rath mode in another one. And that creates a fundamental difference. So, after you are done brainstorming the adjectives, find a visual representation. Would you like your bot to be something like Cortana, a simple ring, whom you know is a robot? Or would you like to be someone like Google Assistant, who is just a jumping squiggle of dots of different colors? Whenever you are coming up with a persona, make sure people have something visual to represent it. Like someday if I call Ravish up, his face is going to be on my mind when I talk to that person, right? Maybe it's a Google Duplex answering the call for him, I never know. But from my perspective, I know in my mind that this is the guy I'm calling. So whenever you do anything, you need to make sure that even after all those voice interactions, people look at their screens whenever they're talking with the Google Assistant, right? So you need to have, even if a minimal thing, but you need to have something visual the user can associate with. Any queries till now? Till now, we have covered why you need to create a persona and how you can start creating a persona. And we have not written a single line of code. That is up to you. You want, suppose sir, you want your bot or action, the bot representing your app action, to be funny, jovial, and sweet-tempered. Someone can decide their bot should be angry, short-tempered, and rude. So it's the very simple adjectives is define how you want them to interact, and those adjectives then govern what sort of responses you program into them. And once you have that blueprint ready, you can easily code out the responses, right? So if you want your bot to be like Dennis the Menace, you can always make it crack Mr. Wilson jokes, right? And always make sure you decry Margaret's having a crush on Dennis. How many of you read Dennis the Menace? So few. I'm disappointed. But anyway. Good designs balance the need for clearly defined user paths with users' desire for shortcuts directly to what they want. Anyone wants to explain what this line means? Anyone? Just give it a shot. Guys, this is a session on actions for Google. So you are attending a session on how to build an interactive content where you interact with your voice and your brain. So let's have an interaction right here, right now. Good designs balance the need for clearly defined user paths with the user's desire for shortcuts directly to what they want.
So basically, you're saying the tool must figure out a way such that the users can explain what they want.
Exactly. It is like what when we had a visual UI, the user had to figure out where to go and to attend a certain task. Now it's turn on the service to find out what the user wants to do and present them with the relevant option. It's now turn on the use of the machine, of the action, of the app to climb the learning curve which the users had to do earlier. So instead of providing a rule-based interface for everyone, they're customizing the response for every user. They are making sure that the app itself gives you the output which you need to continue the conversation and continue using the service. That is what you need to do in a good design. That is what intuitive design is. Nothing can get more intuitive than using your voice. Of course, you can say that I will design something, a UI that does something by tracking where your eyeballs are. You can do that, but as of now, we don't have the technology quite in place. The technology we have quite in place is using a voice. You just tell them to do something and they do it, right? You don't have to tell your Google Assistant that, hey Google, text mom that within double quotes, I am home, I will be home late. You say, hey Google, tell mom I'll be home late. Google figures out what to do. Have anyone of you used a Google Calendar widget for Chrome? Any one of you? Right. And what is the striking feature there?
Feature is what I think is that to even Google like saving my email.
Right. So
It constantly reminds me of inside messages to for the people. The emails that email like
reminders come to your email, right? But what is the reason we brought this up? If you ever use a Google Calendar widget for Chrome, you will see that whenever you click on the plus button to add an event or reminder, there is no place called mark time, mark place. There's one single text field. I have meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. at this place. The NLP figures out what to do next. It stores the action, it takes a time tag, it extracts a location tag, it extracts the relevant feature tag, and it tags it automatically. This is what you want a machine to do. It wanted to figure out what the user needs without the user having to explicitly tag everything. Right? That is why we have NLP. That is why we have natural language processing. That is why we implement AI in a service in the very first place, so that we reduce the load on the user in the very first place. Your very first goal is to make sure that a user does not have to climb any learning curve. Because the steeper the learning curve is, the lower your user retention will go. Right? Users will automatically know what they can ask for when they start talking to an action. So you need to give them the paths to follow. When you're first talking with them, so this is the only, you can say, con of a voice-based UI. Whenever you have a user in a visual UI, you can just see and say, okay, these are the things that I can at least get from this app. Now the extra things I have to go out and inside and dig deeper and figure it out. With a voice-based assistant, the user does not really know because there's no way you can see or foresee what you can do. So whenever a user uses in the very first place, you have to make sure that you inform them what your action is capable of, without having them to climb the learning curve. How many of you have heard the term gamification? Right. Can you please explain to us what gamification is? Right. So you make everything a game. Like, in a way, you make them climb a learning curve without making them realize it is a learning curve in the very first place. Right? How many of you have played games like Alto's Adventure, Alto's Odyssey? Or any other infinite runner game that gives you a manual overlook of what you have to do in the first run itself. Right? So whenever you're playing those games for the very first time, what happens is you start the game, there's no manual involved. You start the game, but as soon as you see a boulder coming in the way, a pop-up comes up and tells you what to do. Tap to jump, right? So it sort of interacts with you and tells you what to do on the flow. It does not pop up a manual and say, okay, now read these steps to follow through this step, read these steps to go to the next level. You make the user learn on the go. You make the user learn what he can do without making him realize that he's learning. And this is a tricky part. This is where you have to balance the part between telling user what you can do without making them realize that you are making them learn something. And this part you have to figure it out on your own. You do, you practice, you grow, you realize. Test and iterate. Now, the very first thing we do whenever we're building an algorithm or any other program is we test with numerous test cases, we reiterate, we optimize it, and stuff like that. Identifying problems is difficult when you're just focusing on the design. So, whenever you're designing a conversation, see what a conversation is. You don't need to actually build an app or write a single code test out a conversation. You can simply write a series of conversations, a series of statements which your bot or action needs to implement. You can simply talk it out with someone who you think can be a user. It might be a friend, it might be a sibling. Just talk to them. Okay, see, this is what I'm trying to achieve with this thing. This is what the conversation will look like. Tell me how intuitive or how easy you find the grasping to. Right? You don't do a single line of code and you test your conversation. Now, how do you actually design a conversation? Anyone? How can you design a conversation? Anyone, anything, anyone. Yes. Identifying keywords and returning results. Right. Anything else? How about I say that you can simply build a conversation by writing down a conversation? You write a play, you are building a conversation, you're building on the go. Now when you're building a conversation, you try it out with real people. But whenever you're writing a play, you have multiple characters. When you're building a conversation for an action, you just have two. Your action and the user. You write the conversation which you expect it to be. You try it out on a real person. You become your action. You you tell out the conversation, the statements that your action will tell them, and see how the users reply to it. You test it on a real life without building anything. Then you see what feedback they give and reiterate and again change the conversation which you have built in the very first place. So you can test and reiterate on this in a very finite way without ever having to learn a single line of code. Whoever are novice developers who have never read a single line of code, all of us can design a conversation. It's easy. Grab a paper, write down what you want to achieve. Talk to people and see what they want to achieve and how far are you successful in making them achieve that. This brings us to the Wizard of Oz experiment. How many of you have heard of the Wizard of Oz? Seen the movie, read the book? No one? So, for those of you who haven't, it was a story of a girl called Dorothy. I guess it was Dorothy, right? So, she goes on an adventure with a scarecrow, a tin man, and I forgot who else. They reach the kingdom of Oz, and the kingdom of Oz is ruled by the wizard. And what happens there is basically, there's a guy who stands behind a curtain, and he tells you certain things, and sometimes what he tells you seems to be magic, but those things come true. So basically, you can't see who the person behind the curtain is, but you can feel his actions, you can feel his responses. It's sort of being in the confession box of any church, right? So basically, Wizard of Oz experiment tells you is, they refer to the idea there is a man behind the curtain pulling the levers. This test is what I told you in the very first place. You become the action, get users to tell you stuff, and then just read it. Just read it and build on what feedback you get. And a simple test, like how many of you app developers here? Give me a hand. Raise your hands again. You guys do unit tests, right? You guys write unit tests for your app to make sure it passes, your algorithms pass all the tests. For building a conversation, Just the conversation. I'm not talking about the background services and integrations, but just the conversation. You don't really need to write tests per se. You need to because what is a conversation? It's a front end for your service. Instead of using scripting language like HTML and JavaScript to write the front end, you design a conversation and use some service like Dialogflow or Wit.ai to make sure, the conversation is implemented, right? So when a conversation is essentially the front end, you test it out by talking it out with real users, and that is essentially the Wizard of Oz test. Nothing more. We give it a fancy name because nothing in tech works without a fancy name. Google would not have been so famous if it had not been named Google. Had not been named Google. How many of you use DuckDuckGo? How many of you have used DuckDuckGo? How many of you have used Google? How many of you use Chrome? How many of you use Firefox? Right. So the first time I'm seeing a Firefox concentration is higher than Chrome's. So essentially, a Wizard of Oz test is a very big, fancy name slapped on a very simple test which you can run on your own in a couple of minutes. But that is the crux of it. The very fundamentals of building a conversation is you write it down, you test on real users, and when you get feedback from them, you improve. And then after you have tested out around say 20 or 30 users, then you go ahead and say, okay, now I have a refined product. Now I have a refined conversation that makes users do what I want them to do. Then you proceed with the building. Now a bit of the technical jargon. Assistant says you can talk to the assistant. The data goes through something called Dialogflow. How many of you have heard of Dialogflow? How many of you have heard of API.ai? Yeah, so API.ai was rechristened Dialogflow. So API.ai is basically you build conversations without writing a single line of code. You will basically what do with Dialogflow is you write a test case, you write a test statement, then you flag parameters on it. With those parameters, you invoke what we call intents. Example. So have you written a simple Java, like a simple program in any language, right? Suppose you have done something like if that you take an input x, if x equal to 1, call function y, else call function z. In Dialogflow, x is your user input, the conversation. If x equal to this is the parameter you flag. If x equal to this, then call y. Y is the intent you trigger in Dialogflow to do a certain specific task. Else call y. Else is what we can relate with a default statement of a switch case. So basically, you flag certain things as parameters. If those parameters match, you call a certain intent, which in normal programming jargon you call a certain function. Else,
so basically, you need a list of questions first.
That's the basic question. That is why we need to build a conversation first. Only then we can go forward to building a conversation dialogue. Because if we have no clue of what a user response would be, then we have no clue on which parameters to flag. Suppose we are building an action which gives out book reviews. And we ask our user, which book do you want reviewed for? They tell me a book by, say, Ray Bradbury, written on a dystopic future. I can have two parameters here. Ray Bradbury as the author's name. I invoke a function which searches books written by Ray Bradbury. Then I narrow my search with another parameter, dystopic future. In my book review list, I have tagged the book reviews with certain words. That this book covers certain topic. So when I've found all the books which Ray Bradbury has written, I narrowed down the search further with the parameter dystopic future. Which books has Ray Bradbury written which are written on dystopic future? So this is how we call intents in dialogue. And unless we know that the user will respond in a certain way, we're not really sure what it does. We trigger the default fallback intent, which usually says, I don't understand, here's the result from the web. So it does a direct Google search. But a Google search is not essentially what we're striving for when we're building an action. We want to give them the information right in that chat feed. We don't want them to open the Google platform at all. Because if they're actually going to the search page, they could have done it from the browser. They wouldn't have come to the assistant in the first place. The very reason we build the system is that they don't need to do a manual search themselves. They don't need to have that huge list of search results to search from. It's because we can give them the most relevant result on our own. Our system can parse the input they have given and give them the most relevant result of their own. That is the reason why we build conversations. That is the result. That is the reason why we are talking about building conversations. That is why we're not talking about building commands. Because if you just build commands, you don't really know how to follow up to a certain command. That will become very monotonous and robotic task. That's what rule-based chatbots do. You hit a certain button, that's a certain parameter you can. That is the only sort of input that the user can give to the machine. It comes back, the same thing all over again. It's a hard-coded if-else statement. But users don't always want to talk in if-else statements, right? Yes.
In this case, you just added more if conditions. That's it. If you give different types of questions the user can ask and you have a set to define answers, it's just adding more if conditions. That's it.
So AI is essentially a huge bunch of if-else statements implemented using a neural network. That is a very fundamental way. It's a huge bunch of if-else statements, but why do we use things like neural network and fuzzy logic? Because you can't really manually write that many if conditions.
My question was, if you're giving all the if conditions, then what's the AI part? I thought the AI would understand the question in different ways. You don't have to give all the sets of.
That's what he's saying, right? So,
have you, sir?
A question in 7 days, a question in 30 days would have different answers. You would
Understand the question in different ways. I give the parameters already.
So to break it out further for you, AI is not really understanding something in one way and understanding something in other way. AI has different part. AI has something called machine learning. AI has part of it something called computer vision. AI has a part of it something called natural language processing. AI has part of it called natural language generation. These are separate branches of AI. We don't implement AI as a large on something. We implement branches of it. When an actuary is trying to recognize what you have said, that is natural language processing. When it's replying to your query, there's natural language generation. When you point your Google lens at something and try to understand what the thing is, that is computer vision. So there are branches of AI which we implement at different times. And at this stage, we can't tell that, okay, we have used AI. Because someone who's experienced will tell you, okay, what AI have you used? Right? So AI is not really one field, it's a combination of many different spheres of knowledge brought together as a group. Any other questions? Are you guys even listening? So anyway, should I go a little deep into the architecture of using Dialogflow? Or should I not? What do you understand from this? Just take a look. Just remember what I've told you, what you have heard through the course of this. And just take a look at this diagram and what you can infer. First he takes the input. Returns the welcome intent in this case. Right. Anyone else having problem understanding this diagram? Anyone? Raise your hand. It's okay. Just take a good look at it. Just take a look at exactly all the commands you've written and then think what it could be about. This is a diagram of how your data flows when you are using Dialogflow as a backend to building a conversation. No queries. So should I, in a typical class professor mode, ask someone to stand up and explain to me what they have understood? Should I?
You can just ask that everyone is speaking about NLP. Just ask that which domain of AI does it fall. Because if they don't know the basics, then it will be very difficult for them to understand.
That will come the later part, like what is the understood what NLP is about. Because since he brought up the question of AI, that is when I actually told them about what the different branches of AI are in the first place. So anyone of you having trouble understanding data flow, how the data is flowing, and which sort of AI algorithms you are using in the very first place? You said yourself, NLP.
Like, what's the difference between NLP and NLP?
Natural language processing is how the system parses the data. NLU is the context with which the machine understands the intent with which you want to say. Right? When you say something like, when you do a simple Google search and you make a typo and Google returns something, did you mean this? That is NLU. NLP is basically searches for the parameter in the statement you have already given in the search results. Right? So that is the fundamental difference. NLU is how the machine understands the context to be and what it thinks it is, and NLP is basically parsing the data. Right? Any other questions?
Explain this once again.
So this is the basic data flow diagram for our action. You start with a user saying, hey Google, talk to XYZ language, which then goes to the assistant. The assistant then uses certain NLP. What the very first thing we need to do is, we cannot really nowadays implement an NLP algorithm straight on voice. We need to convert it to something which the machine understands. Right? So we do a speech to text, that NLP algorithms run on the text. Then we do a ML ranking. What is ML ranking? See, the very right. Before you know what ML ranking is, I need to give a little introduction, a little theory of how neural networks work. Right? So neural networks work on the principle of assigning weights. So suppose you have a single neuron, you're training a single neuron. You give them inputs like, do I have a chalk here? Yeah. So suppose there is input 1, input 2, input 3. This is output. Right? The first training data set I'm giving to a single neuron in a neural network is the second data set is the third data set is what can you infer from these patterns? What pattern can you see between the input and the output? Any pattern you see. I1 gets preference. Anyone sees any other pattern? Boolean logic to some extent. But let's think it. Let's just look at this. Let's assume there's no Boolean logic, there's no Boolean algebra. We can see, right, that what is I1? In all the three cases, that is the output. Right? So how a neural network works is, whenever you get the first set of input and output, it assigns weights to all three. Right? So suppose it assigned to I1 the weight of 0.3. It assigned say a bit higher one because in the very first round it saw that what was I1, that was the output. Right? So it ranked them say 0.3, 0.3, 0.3. This is a weight assigned to all the three inputs. Right? In the second pass, it says 0, 1, 1. The output is again I1. So what it does is, it increases the weight on I1 to say 0.5, decreases on I2 to say 0.2, on 3 to 0.2. Because it has sensed a certain pattern. Whenever I input a third input data, it again sees that although both the three data are same, the first data is also equal to the output data. So we now see that there is no, yes.
Then how will you get the first output? Like first output, you look at the output, second two outputs are getting prepared by the I1. Okay? But how do you get the first output? Like
These are training data set. You know, whenever we are using ML models, we have two sets of data. One is for training, the second is for testing. So whenever we have, suppose these three are the training data set, for training data set is inferred that the input I1 will be the output. Because the desired output in the first three training data set has always been equal to I1. That is the thing I1 has recognized. The simplest is what it sees is, in the first case, it is assigned equal weights to all the cases. In the second pass, it sees that again, I1 is equal to O. it increases weight on I1, increases I2, decreases I3. Third pass, it again is the same sort of pattern. Again increases I2, I1, decreases I2, decreases I3. Now when we come to ML ranking, because we see there is no perfect indication that this is the correct answer, right? So, but if we rank them on the values assigned to the different neurons, I1 has the highest weight, then comes I2 and I3. This is how we rank things. Whenever we will see a demo of an object recognition algorithm, you will never say this is a paper or this is a code. You will see paper, this is a bottle, 70%. Face, human, 80%. There's an 80% match to the training data set it has received. There's 70% match with the training data set it has received. This is why we call it ML ranking, because nothing is permanent absolute. This is the correct result. We say that the most of its values resemble this, so we infer that this is what we want to achieve. ML ranking. So whenever we have reached ML ranking, so say we have 5 different parameters. A user has input a very long, complicated input, and there are 5 different parameters. But I see the weight assigned to one parameter is kind of a bit more than what the other parameters are, right? So because what PageRank does, what PageRank used to do, used to count the number of links connected. So I assign weights to my parameters. Suppose there is an author's name, there is a book's name, there is a year's name. I first search the author, then the book, then the third parameter becomes the year, right? So whenever these weights are pre-assigned weights, then we see that the more priority that we have a parameter with a higher priority. So that gets ranked higher. Then we trigger that intent. So before triggering the intent which searches books based on year, we'll first trigger the one which searches the books based on the author. Action invocation is due to the rankings. After the rankings, I see that that parameter I1 has a higher preference. So I will invoke the intent or the action involved with the I1. Then if I see the data is still not perfect, I will use I2 as a parameter and trigger another intent. Then I3 is a parameter. So there is a hierarchy of parameters created that I will first trigger with this, then with this, then with this. This is how we do ML ranking. ML ranking is not very different from PageRank. We have pre-assigned weights to certain things, and that is how things work. So this is about the basic thing. Then we do an ML ranking, we do an action invocation. The action in this case is a welcome intent. That whenever a user says something, the action trigger is a welcome intent from the dialog flow, which we've already hard coded. That gets returned. Then again, I can give them another input. Again, NLP, speech to text, match language, intent from training phases. Again, now the same thing continues. Yeah, this is the file-based part where it is database. You have some data store. Suppose a book is stored there, so webhook is fetching the data from the store. So this is a basic tenet of working with dialog flow and fetching and parsing data. This is where I will end it before I do any questions. Any questions?
So in the training phase, we've already put the input. Tell me about Kotlin. Kotlin would be a language that should be defined by you earlier on.
I will match Kotlin with an intent parameter. Right. Yeah. So whenever user finds words like Kotlin or Java or Python in the certain phrase, it triggers which language it will.
Tell me about doesn't matter actually. So in this phrase, tell me about Kotlin. Tell me about doesn't have any weightage. Kotlin what has a weightage in this?
Right. Tell me why has maybe a weightage of something. Tell me what has a weightage. Right. What is basically it's telling that you need to know about something. What triggers the question intent? A part of the question intent is what do you want to know about. That is Kotlin. Kotlin has a higher parameter, so Kotlin. Sir, I would have, but in this system, certain scaling issues take place, so which I cannot really go back and forth and show it to right now. But later after the session, you can always come. I have a couple of training boards ready. I can show you how it works. So we don't have any problem with that. We can always show you demos. So that was it from my side. I don't think you enjoyed it, but thanks for not burning shoes or something. I know you guys are obliged to learn from my college.